I'm going to draw a rectangle. Let's put it right in the middle, 200, 200, and we'll make it 100 by 100 wide. And for a rectangle, the first number is how to the far to the right it is. The second number is how far down it is. The third number is how wide it is. And the fourth number is how tall it is. Now note we put it at 200, 200, but this rectangle is not exactly in the middle of the screen or of the canvas. So think about why that is for a second. Okay, so what's going on is the 200 to 200 is the location of the upper left corner of the square. That's going to be a very important thing when we want it to bounce off the walls, because we can't say where this edge is when it hits the wall. Imagining this is a wall, we want it so we have to talk about things in relation to the upper left corner of this rectangle or square. You could, of course, have also done square. I used rectangle, but it doesn't matter too much. All right, so let's talk about we want this to move. If we want it to move, that means we need two variables, one for left to right motion, one for up and down motion. So I'll call a variable x, I'll start it at 0, and a variable y, I'll start that at 0. Now, which of these locations, or these values in the rectangle, are where the variable should change to make it move left and right? So that's right here. I want to add x to this number, or I could just have it be x, but then it would start all the way here, but that's really fine. So here is where x is. X is going to be the left and right motion. So if x changes, that means the left and right position is going to change. And then here I could put y for the up and down location. So now I have a variable deciding how far left or right it is, and a variable for how far up and down it is. Now we've talked before about how you can get a value to change. We could say that x is x plus 0.1 and y equals y plus 0.1. And we'll see what happens. Okay. So this gets the rectangle or the square to start moving. That's a little slow, so I'm going to change it to +1. 11, that's too fast. +1, +1. Okay. Note it's obviously not going to bounce off anything because we haven't explained about how bouncing could work. So let's think about what we really want to happen. We want to have it be x equals x plus 1, y equals y plus 1, but then we want it to go the other way at a certain point. So this 1 and this 1 here, we want to be able to turn into a -1 or a negative value. So instead of using 1 here and 1 here, we're going to come up with a new variable, because variables are things we can change between a positive number and a negative number somewhere else in the program. So instead of calling this 1, I'm going to call it x direction. I'm going to call this y direction. I'm getting all kinds of errors because I haven't defined these yet. So I'm going to define them up here. So now, if at any point I don't like the direction it's going, I can somewhere down here make that negative. So let's look at an example. What I want to have happen is if that square gets to the edge, I want the direction of motion to switch. So let's describe that. So if, and now this is a little tricky, I have to figure out for what value of x will the square be hitting the edge. It's not going to be 400, so this wouldn't be quite right. We can see what happens if I do this. So if x is over 400 and hitting the wall, we want the x direction to change to -1 instead of +1. And we'll see, maybe we can see a bounce here. Not quite. Let's do the same for the y. If the y is over 400, we want to change the y direction to the opposite of what it was. So let's see what's happening here. Oh, I see what's happening. I'm going to add some spacing here to make this a little easier to work with. What's going on? This should be working. If X is over. Oh, I spelled direction wrong here. That would do it. There, it's bouncing back now. Okay. So, but then in this corner here, it's going to keep going. So I've described how it's going to bounce against this wall and this wall, but not these other two walls. So think for a second, how would we modify this or add to these two to fix that? I'm going to copy and paste these because it's going to make this a bit easier. So on the left side and the top side, I want to say if X gets below a certain value, we're going to switch the direction back to 1, positive meaning to the right. And for the Y direction, if it gets below 0, or basically becomes 0, we could say less than or equal to 0. Then we want the direction to be back positive, positive meaning. That's how I have to say that. That it's then going to be going up. So we'll see if it keeps bouncing now. Okay. Now there's a little problem here where it's not bouncing all around the canvas like you may have hoped. It's just bouncing from one corner to the other. This is takes a little bit of a creative problem solving. That we don't actually want it going the same speed, both left and right and up and down. So I'm going to make one of these a little faster. So instead of saying X equals X plus X direction, I'm going to put in a 0.9 times the X direction. And this is going to make it a little slower left to right than it is going up and down, but it's going to make it harder to predict where it's going to go. And then the last thing is that it's going off the screen on the right and off the screen on the bottom. Now that's because the coordinate is the upper left corner of the box. So these numbers 400 and 400 are what I want to change. So if the box is 100 wide, it's really reaching the end of its travel when the upper left corner is at 300. And the same for the Y location. So now it should bounce off as you would expect. If you wanted to add a sound, well, right here on line 16, you could put an event. You could put if you figure out how to play a sound, and there's a lot of information here. If you go to the reference, and then there's this link, p5.sound, and this p5.sound file, it'll tell you how you could load a sound. And I'm happy to, if you have a question, send me an email, because that works. That'll play a sound. But yeah, ask about it. And what you could do is, when the direction changes, you could add another line of code here that says play a sound. You could also even add something like change color. So here we could say fill blue. And here we could put in fill red. And here we could put in fill purple. And here we could put in fill yellow. If we did that, then every time it hit a wall, the color would change to one of those colors. And that might be kind of neat. So in the same way, you could add something that also would change, if a sound is playing or not. So I hope this was helpful. have fun. I think this is fun. It is a little tricky thinking about the motion in this way. So more experience with math or with physics helps thinking about how things move around and how to describe that with some math. But I hope you enjoy this, and let me know if you have any questions.